My very first experience happened when I was 7, and we had just moved into a small farmhouse in New Hampton of New York. The house still stands, albeit in despair, but it's there. When we moved in, it was a series of spiderwebs, dirty floors with the attic full of stuff they didn't want, and the bedroom that I would share with my 3 sisters, full as well. We found dolls from the 1920s, old newspapers, and even an entire series of Life magazine in pristine condition, all of which they let my mom sell. It took us weeks to clear that room from all the boxes. When we finally got our cots in there, we had no curtains on the 2 windows to my right. That's the one that my sister slept under. The moon shone through, illuminating right up to the edge of my cot. We had those thin blankets with one edge that had silk on it. I lay there under my thin blanket, hoping sleep would find me. Just as I started to doze off, I heard heavy breathing coming from the right side, down past the windows. It was moving slowly towards me. Assuming it was a sister, I yelled, "Knock it off!" It went quiet, and I fell asleep. The second night with my sister's sound sleep, the labored breathing began again. It was raspy, desperate, and slowly moving towards me. So I sat up and I yelled again to knock it off and lay back down. It did not stop this time. It just seemed to get heavier and darker and creeping closer to me. So I sit up again, the full moon illuminating the area of the room where the breathing was. I thought this time I'll see which sister is trying to scare me, and I yelled, "Stop it." Now I can see most of the room, and there was nothing there but that terrifying, dark, raspy, and desperate breath getting to my foot of the bed. But there was nothing there. I quickly lay down, covering myself with that thin blanket, horrified as the breath creeped closer to my bed, inch by horrifying inch. I don't remember falling asleep. I do remember it stayed by my bed, and I was too scared to look. The next night, the same thing, but this time, it's moving a little faster to me. Again, I yelled for any sister to knock it off as I sat up. Again, the moon cast its light on that room, with nothing there but a deep, dark, nasty breath headed my way. As it approached my bed, I could hear it crystal clear, but there was nothing there. I went flat so fast and pulled that thin blanket over my head. It worked last night. I prayed it would work again. But this time it inches closer and closer as it gets more desperate and grotesque. Now it's next to my bed as it begins to lean over and breathe harder. It's getting closer to me. Suddenly I feel hot breath upon my face as the terrifying heavy breathing is right on me. I was shaking. I figured it had to be me. It had to be my hot breath I was feeling through that thin blanket. So I held my breath. More hot breath. I hold my breath tighter when the breathing takes a large raspy breath and blows it hard through my blanket. I froze. Terrified. I figured this had to be a sister because I held my breath. The breath does it again, so as fast as I could, I whipped my blanket down to look at the hovering over me. The room illuminated perfectly. There's nothing there. Then, all of a sudden, right in front of my face, that hot, raspy, heavy breath blows in my face yet again, with nothing attached to it. I screamed in horror, running as fast as I could. It was hard for my family to calm me down. I know what I experienced was real and terrifying. In the 5 or 6 years we lived in that rental, I never went back in that room. Not once. I wouldn't cross that threshold again. It was shortly after my experience we found out that the old man living there alone, for years after his wife passed away, died in that very room amongst his hoard of boxes. Not one of my sisters had that experience. I never had it again, but I avoided that room like the plague. This experience made me interested in what haunts us. So, has this ever happened to you? A disembodied ghostly breath? I will never, ever forget it. I'm 62 now, and I still remember that actual feeling. So, I recently moved into a house up in the Appalachian Mountains. Nothing too wild initially happened other than the dogs barking at nothing randomly. Occasional shadows out of the corner of your eye, but nothing you couldn't chalk up to another reasonable explanation. The other day, however, I went to the car to get something only to come back and find the door had been locked. I know I didn't lock it. No one else was inside, but I just chalked it up to an accident. A couple nights later, I was lying in my bed about to fall asleep when I feel what seems like a hand on the top of my head. It startled me, and I opened my eyes to find the room exceptionally dark. So dark that I couldn't even see anything at all. I said a quick prayer and tried to go back to sleep as I felt the sensation lift off of me. A few hours of sleep pass until I am abruptly awoken by the sensation of someone blowing directly in my face. I can't explain it any other way. It was so forceful that it actually blew my hair back into my face, and that's what woke me up. No fans, no windows, no breezes to account for any of this. I still can't explain it. It creeped me out and I spent the rest of the night under the covers. Anyone else ever encounter this, or can shed some light on what it could have been? I'm genuinely perplexed at this point. My first sighting, I was maybe 11 years old. It was summer, so my brother, he was about 13, and him and I were home alone. It was approaching mid-morning and I was still asleep when something suddenly woke me up. I raised my head and saw a boy that looked just like my brother. Short, dark hair, red shirt, clearly a young boy, standing in my doorframe. As soon as I spotted him, he darted away. His face was very blurry, but I have bad eyesight and obviously didn't have my glasses on because I had literally just woken up. So I kind of just grumbled to myself and got up. I went downstairs to hang out with my brother about an hour later and asked why he had woken me up, but he swore up and down that he had no idea what I was talking about. He is a notoriously terrible liar. His eyes sparkle mischievously when he lies, and terrified of anything paranormal. So I believed him and just kind of, I don't know, I didn't know what to make of it. The second sighting, I was 21. I was at my workplace, a secular preschool located in the basement of a big old church. Not unusual if you know anything about New England. We were months and months into the school year. We had our routines. I was comfy with the building, and I knew the kids' personalities well. I was at the sink in the bathroom, down the hall and around the corner from the classroom, with 3 boys. One boy, we'll call him T, had finished washing his hands and was waiting up against a wall for the other two boys, W and G, to finish washing their hands. T was a very, very sweet, innocent kid. Not a sly or mischievous bone in his body. He once burst into tears when another child joked that the amount of snow we'd gotten overnight was going to cover the whole school because, and I quote, "I love school and don't want it to go away." I was only watching him out of the corner of my eye because W and G were very playful and also BFFs, and they were needing most of my attention. Lots of prompting to finish washing their hands. Out of the corner of my eye, I see T haul ass around the corner and back towards the classroom. His short blonde hair, his red shirt, and his blurry face. I assumed it looked that way because, I don't know, he was moving at a high speed in my periphery, sprinting full tilt away from me. I call out after him and run up to the corner and look around it. Couldn't go further because I needed to keep W and G in my sight, knowing I should see him in a very long hallway, but the hall is empty. There's no way he could have gone to the end of that hall and back into the classroom yet. I started panicking. I know I can't go looking for him until I get the other boys back into the classroom, so I run back into the washroom to grab them. But then T emerges from a toilet stall that was in the opposite direction than the one the blurry face ran. He's looking very shy and giggly, and he just goes quietly, "Huh, I tricked you." And then he goes back to his spot against the wall. "You sure did, buddy." But all those kids back to the classroom, and was too busy to think much more about it after that. So yeah, I'm 24 years old now. Haven't seen it since, but wonder about it often. Does anyone know what the fuck this little dude could be? I've read theories about ghosts like choosing not to show certain parts of themselves if they think the sight could be disturbing. But there's also those Japanese no-face ghosts. I don't know. It never felt scary or malicious. It was always just playful. Genuinely felt like a child's energy both times. I just worry about this little ghost boy sometimes. So this was probably in 2013, and I was 6 years old at the time. I couldn't tell if I was either at daycare or my dad's, but I believe so, daycare. Everything around me was so colorful, like a rainbow and toys which I never had at home. I remember sitting down on the floor watching old Disney movies on an old vintage TV with a few other kids. The daycare workers, I believed, were serving us food, such as crackers and milk. After that, they sent us to bed, but in the same room, we were all sleeping on those foamed puzzle mats with blankets and pillows. My younger self at the time didn't want to sleep with a bunch of other kids I didn't know. I suffered severe social anxiety as a child and didn't like playing or talking to other kids. I still do to this day. The daycare workers even put on soothing music to help us sleep using a radio player. They play old Disney music as well. I remember they played The Lions Sleep Tonight from The Lion King. The sound quality coming from that radio sounded so horrible that the sound was glitching and freezing. The lights were also turned off, which creeped the shit out of me. So much so that I started to cry. I missed my dad and wanted to go home. I continued to cry for like an hour or God knows what. I couldn't stop crying of how scared I felt. The song was also looped, which made it even more scarier for me. All the kids that were in the same room as me were as well asleep. I remember that there were also toys beside me, an old vintage dollhouse and vintage toys, such as those old Fisher-Price little people. I saw one of them moving at the corner of my eye. I remember one of them mocking my cries, like those toys when you say something and they repeat the same thing as you. It scared the shit out of me, so much that my heart dropped and I immediately stopped crying. I ended up throwing my pillow at the toys as I got up and crawled away from them. I then crawled over to a few kids that were asleep and laid beside them because I was scared shitless. I ended up falling asleep and waking up as all the kids got picked up by their parents and my dad. I didn't say anything to him about what happened because I was confused about the whole thing, and I never got to go back to that daycare ever again because I had older sisters that had babysitted me now. I still remembered this because this was probably my first ever paranormal experience, and it scared the shit out of me. Last night, I went to my bathroom around 2 a.m. late at night. I was increasing my phone volume too, since I was a bit scared after watching a horror movie. All of a sudden, I heard a voice. It was a female's voice that sounded like she said, I thought it was the sound of my phone. Actually, it came from the outside of the stairs, or I just thought, because maybe it was my phone volume. Then suddenly I heard it again. It was the same voice, but this time a bit louder. In my mind, I was very confused, and it was filling me with anxiety. I rushed out of the bathroom, and I began to throw up. Funny thing is, as I was shaking in fear, but the urge to pee also started to come. I was like, fuck it. This is my home. Why should I be scared? And then I woke up and went to pee, and then nothing happened. Now, talk about the past back when I was really young. I experienced something similar to that the first time, but it was an actual voice screaming at me. It was a lot of voices actually, just telling me to get out and to hurry, but that was it. I admitted I have an anxiety disorder, but this is just crazier than I expected, and it all just happened to me at the same time that I watched a horror movie.